He heard the sound before he saw her, soft, broken sobs carried by the wind, tangled in the whisper of the river. If you love tales of the untamed frontier, saddle up and subscribe. The West is full of stories waiting to be told. The sun was bleeding itself into the western horizon when Jack Callahan reined in his horse by the riverbank. The world around him was painted gold and crimson, the kind of beauty that made a man forget, for a moment, that the West was a place built on pain and dust. His boots hit the ground with a thud, and the quiet crunch of gravel mixed with the steady gurgle of the river. He'd been riding since dawn, chasing silence, chasing distance, away from everything that once bore his name. Then he heard her. A woman's cry, faint, muffled, but real. Not the kind of cry that asks for help, the kind that's already given up. Jack froze, his hand instinctively moving toward the worn handle of his Colt. In these parts, crying could be bait. Outlaws were clever that way, a soft voice in the dusk to draw in a foolhardy heart. He waited, listening. The wind brushed past him, bringing the scent of water, wild sage, and fear. He followed the sound, boots sinking into the damp earth until he saw her. She sat on the edge of the river, her dress torn, the hem darkened by mud and river water. Her hair, once golden, was tangled and heavy with dust. Her face was turned away, but he could see her shoulders trembling. A small leather satchel lay beside her, half open, its contents scattered, a locket, a blood-stained ribbon, and a letter that had been ripped in two. Jack spoke low and slow, like a man used to spooking horses and people alike. "Ma'am," he said, voice gravelly, "you lost, or just needin' a quiet place to cry?" The woman startled, twisting toward him. Her eyes, wide and green as the summer plains, locked on his. There was a flicker of fear, then relief, then something deeper. "I didn't think anyone would come," she whispered. Her voice cracked. I thought I was alone out here." Jack holstered his gun, stepped closer, but careful, the West didn't reward kindness too easy. "Not many folks cry by a river unless they've lost something worth crying for," he said. "What happened?" For a moment, she just stared at him, her lips pressed tight like she was holding back a storm. Then, finally, she said, "They took him. My husband. The marshal's men. They said he was a thief. Said he robbed the Carson stage." Jack tilted his head. "And did he?" Her eyes fell to the river. "No," she whispered. "But they hanged him anyway." The silence between them grew thick. Jack looked down at the rippling water and the reflection of the dying sun. He'd seen 1,000 faces of loss, in wars, in saloons, in dusty towns where men drank themselves to death. But there was something different about this woman's sorrow. It wasn't loud. It was hollow. "I buried him up by the hill," she said softly. "Didn't even mark it. Didn't want them coming back." She reached for the letter on the ground, her fingers trembling as she folded the torn halves together. "And now I don't know where to go." Jack knelt beside her, his shadow falling across the water. "What's your name, ma'am?" She hesitated. "Clara," she said finally. "Clara Mays." "Jack Callahan," he said. "Used to be a ranch hand. Now I just keep riding. Clara gave a faint, tired smile. "You look like a man who's been running from something." He looked away. "Ain't we all?" The wind shifted, carrying the faint echo of a coyote's cry. Jack's horse stamped nervously behind him. There was a weight in the air, a warning, maybe, or just the memory of danger that never left these lands. "Where were you headin', Clara?" he asked. "Nowhere," she said. "Just away." Jack stood, offered his hand. "Ain't safe to be away without a direction. You'll freeze or worse by nightfall. There's an old cabin up yonder ridge, belonged to a trapper I once knew. You can rest there. I'll make sure you're left alone." She looked up at him, suspicion flickering in her tired eyes. "Why would you help me?" Jack shrugged. "Maybe, 'cause I know what it's like to lose every damn thing you ever cared about." Clara hesitated, then reached for his hand. Her palm was cold. The moment their hands touched, Jack felt something shift inside him, a strange, uneasy warmth he hadn't felt in years. By the time they reached the cabin, night had wrapped the plains in deep indigo. Jack lit a lantern, its glow flickering across old wooden walls scarred by time and bullet holes. The smell of cedar and dust filled the small room. Clara sat by the fire, silent, her gaze lost in the flames. Jack poured water into a tin cup and handed it to her. "You should rest," he said. She took it, her hands trembling slightly. "Thank you, Mr. Callahan." He nodded, sat across from her. The firelight danced across his rough features, the kind that carried more miles than years. "Just Jack'll do." For a while, the only sound was the crackle of the fire and the wind pressing against the old cabin walls. Then Clara said softly, "They said he stole gold from the stagecoach, but he couldn't have. He was working the ranch that morning. Someone set him up." Jack's jaw tightened. "The law don't always care for truth," he said. "No," she whispered. "They don't." Her voice trembled, and tears filled her eyes again. She clutched something around her neck, the locket he'd seen earlier. "This was his," she said, opening it. Inside was a faded picture, a young man, dark-haired, smiling faintly. On the opposite side, a lock of blonde hair tied with thread. "He said it'd keep us close, no matter where he went." Jack stared at the photo, his stomach knotting. Something about the man's face felt familiar. He couldn't place it. Maybe he'd seen him once, maybe not. But the unease lingered. "Clara," he said quietly, "where'd this happen?" "Red Hollow," she replied. 2 days' ride east." Jack's breath caught. Red Hollow. A place he swore never to ride through again. A place where he'd buried more than one ghost. He stood, turned away from the fire, hiding the tightening in his chest. "You rest here tonight. I'll see what I can find out." Clara looked up, startled. "You don't even know me. Why would you do that?" Jack didn't answer right away. He stared out the small window at the black sky and said, "Because sometimes a man don't get to choose who he helps. Sometimes it just feels like he's paying off a debt he don't remember making. When he turned back, she was watching him, not with fear anymore, but with something like hope. He tipped his hat. "Get some sleep, ma'am." Outside, the cold bit through his coat as he walked toward his horse. The stars above stretched endless, silent witnesses to all the sins buried in the soil below. He tightened his saddle straps, but the thought wouldn't leave him, that man's face in the locket, that name, Red Hollow. He'd been there the night the gold went missing. He'd seen the bodies. He'd heard the gunfire echo through the canyon. And he'd ridden away before dawn, leaving behind a trail he swore never to follow again. Maybe fate was cruel. Maybe it was just a circle that brought a man back to where he started, no matter how far he ran. Jack mounted up, the horse snorting softly as he turned toward the horizon. The firelight from the cabin faded behind him, swallowed by darkness. But inside, Clara wasn't asleep. She sat by the dying fire, staring at the locket in her hands. With trembling fingers, she opened the small hidden compartment behind the photograph. Inside was a folded scrap of paper, one that didn't belong. It was written in a rough hand, "If you're reading this, Clara, don't trust the man who finds you. He was there that night." Her breath caught. The locket slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a soft thud. Outside, through the crack in the wall, she saw the faint glow of Jack's lantern disappearing into the night. And she whispered into the dark, "Dear God, what have I done?" The wind howled across the plains, carrying her words into the endless night. The night pressed heavy over the plains, a dark, endless ocean of wind and whispers. Clara sat frozen beside the dying fire, her fingers still trembling over the crumpled note she had pulled from the locket. The words burned into her mind like a brand: "Don't trust the man who finds you." He was there that night. Outside, the sound of Jack's horse faded into the distance, swallowed by the moan of the wind. She rose slowly, every heartbeat echoing like a drum in her chest. Who was Jack Callahan, really? He'd seemed rough but kind, a man with sorrow behind his eyes, someone carrying ghosts. But if the letter was true, then the man who saved her might be the same man who helped hang her husband. The fire crackled low, shadows twisting across the cabin walls. Clara pressed the note against her heart, tears welling again, not from grief this time, but from fear. She looked toward the window, half expecting to see his silhouette returning through the darkness. There was nothing but the distant cry of a night bird and the river whispering beyond the trees. She sank to her knees, whispering a broken prayer. "Please, God, don't let it be true." But the West didn't care much for prayers. Jack rode hard through the dark, the cold air biting his face. The rhythm of the horse's hooves was the only sound for miles. Every shadow looked like a ghost, every gust of wind carried the voices of men he'd left behind. Red Hollow lay ahead, 2 days east if he rode slow, 1 if he pushed through the night. He didn't plan to rest. He couldn't. He couldn't shake the image of Clara's eyes, how they looked when she told him about her husband. Pure pain, the kind that no lie could fake. He wanted to believe her husband was innocent. But there was something in the way she spoke, something that scratched at the back of his mind. Because Jack had been there that night, when the Carson stage was robbed, when men died and gold vanished into the dark. He'd been part of a posse sent to track down the thieves. But the truth of what happened wasn't as simple as the stories told later in the saloons. He remembered it now, the gunfire, the smoke, the panic. A shot had rung out from behind, not ahead. The marshal's men had found 1 wagon burned, 2 bodies, and the gold gone. The next morning, they hanged a man for it. Said his name was Thomas Mays. Jack hadn't stayed to see the rope drop. He told himself it wasn't his business. That the law had spoken. But somewhere deep down, he'd always known something didn't sit right about that night. Now fate had dragged him back, through the tears of a widow by a river. By morning, Clara had packed what little she had. The letter from the locket was folded deep in her satchel. She didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't stay. The cabin creaked as she opened the door. The morning light spilled in, soft and golden, but it brought no warmth. She saddled the old horse Jack had left tethered nearby, whispering to it softly, like a woman who'd learned that silence was safer than trust. She rode west, following the river until the land opened into wide plains. She didn't have a map, only instinct and desperation. The nearest town she remembered was Sage Creek, 3 miles south. Maybe someone there knew the truth about her husband's hanging. Maybe someone had seen Jack Callahan before. By noon, she reached the edge of the town, a place too small to be on most maps, but big enough to hold secrets. The wooden sign read Sage Creek, POP 93. The streets were quiet, just the soft clatter of shutters in the wind. A blacksmith worked outside his forge, a dog sleeping at his feet. Across the way, the saloon doors creaked as she dismounted. She tied her horse and stepped inside. The smell of whiskey and dust hit her at once. A few men turned to look, travelers, drifters, 1 or 2 with the kind of eyes that measured everything they saw. She walked to the bar, her hands shaking slightly. The barkeep, a gray-haired man with a lazy eye, leaned forward. "You look like you've seen trouble, miss." Clara met his gaze. "I'm looking for someone." "Jack Callahan." "You know the name?" The man frowned. "Can't say I do." "Should I?" He said he'd been through these parts before. "A ranch hand, maybe. Long coat, scar on his left cheek." The barkeep's expression shifted, just enough for her to see it. Recognition. And maybe fear. He wiped the counter, not meeting her eyes. Lady, there's a lot of men with scars around here. Some you'd best not go looking for. Clara's voice hardened. He helped me last night. Found me by the river. But I think he's hiding something. The barkeep's hand froze. Slowly, he leaned in close and said, if Jack Callahan's the man you think he is, you'd best stay far away from him. Word is, he used to ride with the McCready gang. Outlaws. Stage robbers. The ones who hit the Carson run 2 years back. Clara's stomach dropped. You mean? I mean he was there when your husband died, the barkeep said, voice low. And if he's back around these parts, there's only one reason, the gold they never found. The room seemed to spin around her. She grabbed the counter for balance, heart pounding so loud she could barely hear herself think. Outlaw. Robber. The man who held her hand by the river, who looked at her with kindness, was he the same man who'd watched her husband hang? She stumbled out of the saloon, the sunlight blinding her. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled. Jack reached Red Hollow by dusk. The place hadn't changed, a ghost town stitched together by silence and regret. The gallows still stood in the square, rotted and leaning. A single rope swung in the wind, creaking like a memory that refused to die. He dismounted, tied his horse, and walked down the dirt street. Every step stirred dust and ghosts. He could almost hear the shouts, the crack of gunfire, the sound of a man's last breath. He found the old sheriff's office. The door hung crooked, half off its hinges. Inside, papers littered the floor, the smell of mildew and rot thick in the air. He rummaged through drawers, kicking aside debris until he found what he was looking for, a ledger, faded and torn. It listed every arrest, every hanging. His finger ran down the column until he found it. Thomas Mays, charged with robbery and murder, executed April 16, 1881. Evidence, sack of gold coins, pistol with initials, TM. Jack stared at the page, his gut tightening. The pistol. He remembered that gun. Because it hadn't belonged to the man they hanged. It belonged to the marshal. He slammed the ledger shut. The truth hit him like a bullet, Mays had been framed, hanged for the marshal's own crime. And if that was true, then the man who'd written Clara's warning, the one who said, don't trust the man who finds you, must have known Jack's name would make her run, to keep her safe from coming back here. A noise behind him made him spin, gun drawn. It was Clara. Standing in the doorway, her face pale, her dress torn from the ride. I know what you did, she whispered. You were there when they killed him. Jack lowered his gun, pain flashing across his eyes. I was there, he said softly. But I didn't pull the trigger. Then why didn't you stop them, she cried. Why didn't you tell me? He stepped closer, voice low, heavy. Because I didn't know who you were till last night. And because the man who killed your husband ain't dead yet. Her breath hitched. Who? Jack glanced past her, the horizon burning red with the setting sun. The marshal. He framed your husband, took the gold, disappeared after the hanging. Folks say he's hiding out near Devil's Pass. Clara's hands shook, tears streaming down her face. And what do you plan to do? Jack holstered his gun. Finish what should have been finished that night. She stared at him, torn between hate and the strange pull of trust she still felt. You'll get yourself killed. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that knew too much of death already. Maybe. But sometimes the only way to wash blood off your hands is with more of it. Clara stepped forward, voice trembling. Then I'm coming with you. Jack froze. You don't know what you're saying, Clara. I know exactly what I'm saying, she said, eyes fierce now. You owe him. And I owe the truth. The wind picked up, howling through the empty town. The old gallows creaked behind them. Jack looked at her for a long moment, at the fire in her eyes, the same fire he'd seen in men who refused to die quiet. Finally, he nodded. All right then. We ride at dawn. As they walked out into the fading light, two shadows stretched across the dirt street, a man haunted by guilt, and a woman bound by love. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled again, like the west itself warning them of what was to come. And in that dying light, Jack Callahan whispered under his breath, maybe redemption's just another kind of noose. The sky flared red over Red Hollow. The wind carried their silence east, toward Devil's Pass, and toward the reckoning waiting there.